Hi everyone, my name is Bill Major, and this is a tech session for Dev Summit 2020 called ArcGIS API for Python, cloning your WebGIS or your GIS content. Like I said, my name is Bill Major. I'm actually a developer on the ArcGIS Enterprise team, and my lead focus areas are actually a developer of the Notebook Server product line, as well as ArcGIS notebooks in general. And then also, but I have done some work or contributions to the ArcGIS API for Python as well. So we're going to talk to you today about cloning your GIS and what that means. Now, first, the title may be a little bit misleading. We're talking about cloning your GIS, and we're not what we're not talking about here. So let me tell you what we are talking about today. We are talking about information of how you can clone. That might not be the best word to use here, but basically clone information or content from one WebGIS to another, or from one portal to another environment. We have a lot of great capabilities out there today that help you do things like this, such as distributed collaboration. But there may be times where you want to do things perhaps a little more detailed or a little more outside of what distributed collaboration may provide. And this is one means to do that. What we're talking about today also is, we use the word cloning, but basically what we're doing is copying content, copying users and groups and content from one GIS to another, from one portal environment to another. So that's really what we're talking about today. If you thought this session was focused on how to move, your portal from one server to another or something like that, fortunately, we're not here to talk about that today. But it is some areas. Well, I'll get to that here in just a moment. This is an area we're constantly looking to expand the capabilities of the ArcGIS API for Python. That is to say, copying content from one portal to another. So this is a expanding area for us. We hear a lot of information from users when it comes to data migration, moving data from dev to test to prod, all those types of things. So this is an active area of development for us on the Python API. And we're always looking to provide better tools, better ways of doing this in the future. So stay tuned. More exciting things to come in this area and in future versions. What are we here not to talk about, unfortunately? We're not here to talk about how you take ArcGIS Enterprise installations, like in a complete environment, and move it from dev to test to, that should say prod. Let me change this for you. That's a bad, let me change it. That's a typo, not a mistake. Dev test to prod. We're not here to talk about how you take your ArcGIS Enterprise environment and move it from one domain to another domain, or how to move your entire setup, software installs from, let's say, on premises to the cloud. Um, not here to talk about those types of things, but if you're interested in talking about, hey, how do I move content from, some pieces of content from one portal to another, um, including maybe some pre-configured users and groups, then we definitely this is an area that we can talk about today and go over. So let's first talk about, or let's review what things work well when cloning or copying. Let's just I probably should use the word copying more than cloning here. When you copy users from one portal to another, which we'll get to, we're going to run through some live examples. Copying web tier authenticated users works well because with web tier authenticated users, we don't actually store user passwords in portal. So given that when you copy users from one portal to another, since there are no passwords involved, Those go over really well, and when users log in to another portal, for example, with that web tier authentication, their user accounts will already be created with content and everything like that. So that actually works pretty well. Moving groups and sharing works really well in what we're going to go through today. Hosted feature services work well. Web apps based on web app templates and even web app builder can be moved across rather seamlessly, and many other types that work fairly well. The one thing to keep in mind here is the Python API is talking directly to the sharing REST API. Let me put this here explicitly. So when we post this as an HTML doc, I have that there. So that means that anything you can get access to through the share and REST API in regards to an item is what we have access to when it comes to cloning and copying. If an item, if there are things behind the scenes on disk or something that the sharing API doesn't lend itself to, then that's where it gets really hard copying information from one portal to another. So please remember that. If the item has everything it needs in the sharing API description of itself to be able to copy it from one system to another, that's good. But if it doesn't, if there are other things underneath the hood that aren't exposed through the sharing API, those are things that don't work well. And let's talk about what some of those things might be. Things that don't work well when cloning. Now, this is probably in a 100% accurate of not working well, but built-in user accounts. So user accounts, in a typical enterprise installation that has username and passwords. You can transfer the accounts over just fine. That's no problem. The problem is when you create these new built-in user accounts in the other system, you have to set a default password. So when you copy a user, you don't have access to their password, right? That's basic security 101. You don't expose, a password out so you can ever, even as an admin, know what a user's password is. So when you create the new accounts, you have to give it some default password. So therefore, when the users log in for the first time, they have to change their password. Not a big deal, but that's the reason that we stated here is it doesn't lend itself well to that. Hosted tile services, map services, image services. So these specific service types are only copied by reference. Okay, now why is that? Well, when you publish a map service or an image service, you don't necessarily have access to all of the imagery on disk, the map documents, and many other things, or it gets very, very complicated through the sharing API. So there's no way for us to really fully, in all, many different scenarios of how you could publish a map service or an image service, really gain access to the information needed to republish it fully on an entirely different system. So in these cases today, these are only copied by reference. It will copy it, but the item that it creates, the actual will point back to the old URL of the actual ArcGIS server service. Okay, which may be okay in some situations, but just be aware of that. And there are also story map. There are some other things that don't copy too well, such as complicated story maps, where when a user creates a story map, they may have put in a whole lot of graphics or links to videos or things like that. And sometimes it's very hard to know what's in that story map so that you can swizzle or transcribe all the URLs in the new environment. So just, it's just something to be aware of. Like, for example, here's an old example of a story map. In this day and time of the coronavirus, not trying to, bring up viruses or things like that, but this was something that was created back with the Zika virus a few years ago. It was a very, very nice story map, very popular. And as you scroll through, these story maps, each page has links to videos and web maps, information to external sources. That's a very interesting looking virus compared to the COVID-19. Actually, I hadn't gone through this in detail in a while. Um, so very very cool story map, which is very cool. But if we look at the JSON representation, and remember the REST API, that's the only thing we have access to when copying an item. This entire story map is represented by this massive JSON block. Okay, so we're going to share and REST items and the data. So it would be kind of hard for us to go through this entire thing, know all the URLs that may exist in here, and be able to provide the means to properly swizzle it into a new environment. Let's say it can't be done, um, but it's just we haven't gotten there with many of the cloning techniques to take into account all these factors. Okay, so just something to be just to be aware of there. At the end of the day, some things clone well, some things either we don't support or don't clone very well at all. All right, so enough of talking about cloning and copying and all that good stuff. Let's go ahead and get started. But how do we get started? So in the example we're going to walk through today, we're in a connected environment, and that's sort of how we support it today. You got to be able to connect to one enterprise environment or one portal environment, and then be able to make a separate connection to a second environment. And then basically what we're going to do is walk through harvesting information out of this one portal and then populating it into the second portal. So it's very cool what it does do. Um, but you do have to be in a connected environment. We don't support being able to do this disconnected yet, where you dump things out to disk, for example, in order to import them. You could do that. I mean, this is Python code. If you wanted to go through the effort, you could build upon examples like this and do whatever you wanted to, such as dumping it out to disk. But that's not what we're talking about here today. All right, so the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and import the Python API, and I'm just going to print out the version. So as you can see, I'm using version 1.8 of the ArcGIS API for Python. This was our most recent release for the Dev Summit 2020. So I do have that version running here. Okay. Now I'm going to connect to two different portals, and I conveniently have called them source and target, so it's easy to understand and wrap your head around. But before we keep going through the code, let's go look at these two portals and just so we can get a feel for what's in each. So the first one is a enterprise installation called WDC Intel Portal, and that's this guy here. Okay. Hopefully you can see this. Am I zoomed in enough? Let's zoom in a little bit more maybe. Thought the zoom level applied for every page. 150. 150. Am I 150 here? That's close. Okay. So this is WDC Info Portal. You can see I have various, some data sets in here, which is cool. I'm logged in as me. I have some folders of different types of data as well. Just some random stuff that I've done, kind of set up specifically for this demo. So we're going to look at how we can take some of this data and actually move it from this portal to another portal, from our source environment to our target environment, right? So let's say you do have a dev and a test environment and they are connected, through the interwebs, let's say. You can actually, get things set up in dev, set up your feature services along with pop-ups and web maps and all of that. And you can then use these techniques to copy it over into the new environment. And what I'm gonna show you today is really nice is it copies the hosted feature services. It even creates the web maps for you, replaces the URLs appropriately. It's all kind of really, really cool stuff. So this is what our portal looks like. This portal also, just so you know, I'm connected as an admin, by the way, has a whole bunch of members, many different people. There's me, Bill Major. I also have some groups that I've created, just as an example, some things just for purposes here today. So I have many users, I have some groups, I have some content. And what I'm going to do is walk you through how we move a lot of this information from our source environment to our target environment. My target environment actually is a portal I use for my Dev Summit plenary demo, where we did a automation where we looked at webhooks and the new scheduling capabilities coming in 10.8.1. So this environment is kind of bare at the moment. It's has some things I used for my Dev Summit plenary, but not much else. I have a couple folders here where I've put a bunch of stuff in it. Um, um, so not a lot going on there in terms of groups. Um, just three groups I used for my plenary demo. Not much there either. And if I go look at the members for my enterprise installation here, uh, just two users. Me, Bill Major, as a user, and me, Bill Major, as an admin. It just so happens I'm admin, but anyway, got two user accounts. No big deal. Okay, so these are the two environments. Environmental is my target environment, and WDC Intel Portal is my source environment. So again, let's walk through some exercises of how I clone, if we want to call it that, or copy this environment from the source enterprise installation to my target enterprise installation. All right, very cool. So let's go ahead and make a connection to each. So for the WDC Intel, I'm going to make a connection and I'm going to provide my username to that portal. It will prompt me for my password. And then if you notice, I'm using my environmental portal here. I'm actually using Notebook Server. So for this purpose, I'm using the ArcGIS API for Python in a notebook, but more importantly, in a hosted notebook within my enterprise environment. So this is Notebook Server. And for the target environment, this is this special GIS home. So when you have Notebook Server set up, federated with your portal, you can actually authenticate back to your portal with this keyword called home. Okay. So I'm on my target environment. I'm going to create a connection to my source environment, but my target, I'm going to use a special syntax here. So let's go ahead and do that. So here it's asking for my password for the source environment. Type in super secret password. All right, you get a little warning here, but don't be alarmed by that. That basically saying, hey, you're logged in as an administrator. Just proceed with caution because things you do here are permanent when you're connected as an admin. So now I can print out just my source GIS object, and sure enough, I'm assured that I'm connected to the WDC Intel. And if I print out my source and then I print out my target, indeed it's environmentaldev.geocloud.com. All right, so far so good. So I might not have gone over this, but what are the steps that we're going to go over? So we're going to make a connection to each, which I've kind of jumped ahead, already shown that. The first thing we're going to do is copy users, because when you think about copying content, you kind of have to do it in order. You first have to copy users over, you then have to copy groups over, and then you copy over items, because when you copy over items, then you assign items to users and do all the sharing. So if you're going to do it right, you need to do it in this order. So copy users first, then the groups over, and then the items, assign the items to the right users if desired, as well as sharing them with the specific groups. All right, so that's the order that we're going to go through. All right, so let's first kind of step through getting some information or understanding some information. So let's first get all of the users that are on my source portal. So I'm not going to start copying or anything. I just want to list them out so I can understand, how many users we're talking about here. So if I run this cell, you will see that my source portal actually has a number of users. And I'll apologize, that's not formatted very well. But that's okay. So this particular portal has a whole bunch of different users. I believe there's close to 100 if I'm not mistaken, okay? So this is just, just an example of, understand what you're about to do, so to speak. All right, the next thing I want to do is also understand, well, what users are already in my target portal? Well, we looked at this a while ago, I only have two, B Major and Portal Admin, right? So what we're going to do first is we are going to copy all of these users from the source portal to the target portal. Okay, and this is a function that's going to do this for us. Basically, it's going to get the information for each user, such as their first name, their last name, some other information such as the description, any thumbnail they may have, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Okay. So basically, for each user, we're going to collect all the information we can about that user so that we can basically create a new user in the target portal and assign it all the same information. Now, the one thing to make note of here is you might be thinking about this already is what we're doing today something that's going to keep the two in sync, like distributed collaboration? And the answer to that is no. What I'm going over today with the Python API is a one-time process. If you wanted to keep them in sync, then you would have to create a Python script that would go through this, every time you ran it and say, hey, does this user exist over there? And if so, let me see if there are any updates to any of the properties, then update the user. Okay, so really what we're going through today is a one-time copy. It's not meant to, at least what I'm showing today, keep things in sync. Okay. So I'm gonna go ahead and run this function. It's not gonna do anything yet because I'm not calling it yet. Okay, so this is just a straight Python. All right, so then I'm gonna get I just do this for track, bookkeeping. I'd get a list of the target users. So here's what I'm gonna do now. Now I'm going to copy these users. So the reason that I'm gonna do this is I'm now actually gonna call that function. Okay, copy user. So I don't loop through all the users in the source. And if the username, I'm not going to copy over any users that may exist with B major or portal admin. So if those users already exist, I'm just going to skip them. And the reason for that is you can't, at least in this example here, I can't create a new user with the same username. Okay, so it would error out if I didn't have this little check in there. So not a big deal. All right, so now I'm going to run this. We're going to copy the users. And remember I said before, built-in user accounts don't clone well. Well, they do. They copy well, but we have to give each user a default password. So in this particular case, we're going to give all the users that are copied over this default password. Maybe the idea is we would move users, then we would let them know what this new password is, and then they could log in and change it or something like that for the first time. Okay, so that's unfortunately in this situation what you have to do. You don't have access to a user's password in the source portal or ever through the sharing API. All right, we're ready. So let's run this, and we keep our fingers crossed, and we're going to see. Oh, well, this is very different from what I did before. Unable to create users. So let's just go over here and make sure no users are actually being created. All right, well, it did create. Oh, I understand what happened. Okay. You can ignore this. Actually, this is unfortunately didn't really prepare for this error, but that's okay. That's okay. Don't worry about that. Your user counts are being created. It says it was unable to create it, but it actually was. And the reason for that was an exception probably occurred trying to get the thumbnail link. So the user did get created. Unfortunately, the update properties didn't work, and it failed there. So although it did create, wonder why no such. Let's just kind of. So these are just the life of a demo, and so it says like that is a valid thumbnail, although it's just the default thumbnail, so not a big deal. No such file or directory. Interesting. All right, so I'm going to move past this for now. I'll try to go back and make sure that this has been corrected in what I post as the proceedings, so to speak, to make sure I get that right. But sorry about that. So it's having some problem with getting the thumbnail for the user. I'm not sure why it can't retrieve that. Get thumbnail link. It definitely no such file or directory. Interesting. Okay. I mean, can I get to that link? Okay. Yeah, it says I can get to it. Interesting. Okay. Well, we'll keep moving forward for now. Our users did get created, as you can see. So if we come over here and look at our target portal, which is environmental, all of our users did get created. For whatever reason, our thumbnails didn't come through. So we'll keep working past that. Thumbnails aren't important for our demo here. So sorry about that. All right, so we copied a whole bunch of users over. They have a default password now, right? Good stuff. Next thing we want to do is we want to copy some groups, okay? So let's talk about what groups do we want to copy over, okay? So I want to basically find any groups at the end of the day that I'm the owner of, okay? I'm not going to try to copy over all groups on my source portal. I want to kind of perhaps copy a small subset of things. So let's see which groups I would copy over as a result of that. So in my source portal, logged in as me, I can see that I own 4 groups. This site administration group I'm a part of, but I don't own it. Okay. But transportation, Redlands, Mali, Appalachian Trail, these are the 4 groups that I own in this case. All right. So I'm restricting, what we're going to copy to only focus on those 4 groups. All right. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to um, copy those groups. I have a function here that will copy the group. Hopefully the thumbnail works. This worked earlier. I did run through this before, so I apologize on the user thing not working. All right, so I got a function. And now what I'm going to do is I'm going to um, go through all of those groups and call the function copy group, target source and the group. And I'm also keeping track of the old ID and the new ID. That comes into play a little bit later, just so that I know, the old group ID, what's the new group ID. You can use that when it comes to doing some of this sharing and things like that. But this is now going to go through and copy all of that. So before I do that, let me go to groups over here in this target. So you can see that I don't have much going on here except these 3 other groups that I do already own: Arizona, California, Nevada. All right, so I'm gonna go ahead and run this now. Hopefully this works correctly. All right, so that was rather quick. It went through and copied the group. So if I come over here now in my target and refresh my portal, sure enough, I have those additional groups there and with their icon. So very quickly I'm able to copy over the groups I want as well. And so that's very powerful, right? If you start thinking about this, you have a really easy script as a basis where you can copy some users, copy some groups, get those properties all set up and ready to go. Okay. But that's the easy stuff, right? Now it comes down to content. How do we start moving content from one portal to the other? So that's what we want to get into now, right? So far, mostly so far so good. I'm still a little bit irritated about why um, this. Maybe I needed to download the thumbnail. I really feel like since this is a Dev Summit session, let me just try something real quick. Does a user have down? I'm gonna waste time here now. But you know what? As with anything, anytime you need help on anything related to the ArcGIS API for Python, please go to developers.arcgis.com/Python. This is your one-stop shopping location for this. We have a lot of great guides, and what guides are examples in-depth explanation as well as a lot of examples. So that's great. We have a lot of sample notebooks, and I believe one of our sample notebooks is the, is a basis of what I'm working on today. So, I didn't want to present anything, out of the ordinary here. Yeah, see, this doesn't get sort update. Maybe I need to download the thumbnail. Um, so bear with me. All right, so we got a lot of great samples here. But also, let's go. This is the API reference. So anytime you want to know something about very specific aspects of the Python API, let's go here. I'm trying to look at a user. Does user have something? Let's look at the methods on a user. I can delete a user. I can delete the thumbnail. Download thumbnail. Interesting. So let's see if we can change this to get this to work. Mm, So target user, blah, 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 blah. So let's download the thumbnail first based on what we're doing here in the group, okay? So let's copy and paste some code. Um, this is troubleshooting on the fly. All right, let's do Shift Tab. Let's get this lined up. Thumbnail file is none. If thumbnail in, so let's say the thumbnail in this case is actually source user dot download. I need a temp dir. Let's create a temp dir. Let's go back down here. Let's see if we can. I'm really kind of interested on this now. Let's just do this. Temp dir. So let's create a temp directory. All right, so temp dir. So I actually don't need this. So let's see if I can download the thumbnail, then provide that as, so let's see if this will work. Let's save my note. If this doesn't work, we'll keep moving forward. But I figured this is, this is a Dev Summit session. You want to see me writing some code, and always having an Esri person trying to troubleshoot something on the fly is, I'm sure, always a lot of it. So let's download the thumbnail. That should return a path. All right, so let's try this. Now, unfortunately, I have to go to my other environment and actually clean it up at the moment because I can't recreate users that already exist. Okay. So I'm going to, fortunately, so I have all these members here. You're right. So I could manually, you know what? Let's instead of opening a notebook, let's take the easy way out. So I display everyone. So I'm just going to select everyone on this page except the two source users, and that's just oh, can I not delete multiple people at once? Oh, that's a bummer. Okay. So I'm going to back up. I'm not going to take the easy way out. I'm going to open a notebook. Open a notebook called Cleanup Portal. All right, 30 minutes in, so I don't want to spend a long time on this, but this did kind of throw me off my game. And when something like this happens, I feel like I really want to try to figure out why. So I'm going to make a connection, and I'm going to delete everybody that is not my original two owners. So that should, and you can ignore that message for the moment. All right, so if I come back to org in my target portal and say members, am I on the right one? Refresh again. Wow, that's very interesting. Man, I'm having, oh, item what's going on? I'm having all kinds of problems today. Not going well. Unable to delete user. User must not own any items or groups. Well, I wonder who in the world that was in reference to. Surely not. Surely not one of these people. All right, let me work on this a little bit more. If it's not portal admin or B major, portal admin or B major. Oh, you know what? I believe this guy, Robert Major. You know what? We transfer those groups. All right, so bear with me. Robert owns these groups. So let me real quick do a little clickety click here so that we can move past this. All right. So probably not ideal to be showing this during a demo, but at the same time, maybe there's value in this so that as you maybe or get into this and work through trying to get things like this to work, you might experience something similar and go through the same. All right, one more. Then we'll try this one more time. And I could have just probably done this in my script as well, but that's all right. So we're gonna, in my target environment, I'm trying to clean up a little bit. Let's go through and make sure all our users can delete now. Now if we come back to org members, there should only be 2 of us left, which there are. So now let's go back. Let me try to copy users again. Not 100% positive this is going to work. Let's see what happens here. Interesting. Well, I'm a little bit better. Something's not quite right with the temp directory, but that's okay. I made it a little bit further. All right. I'll be sure to get that right before I post this link. Okay. But if we come back and check out our target portal now, we do a refresh here, we should have all those same users back again. And the thumbnails I still didn't get quite right, so I apologize. But you get what I'm trying to work at here. Okay. Now, I copied my groups. Oh, I need to do that again, don't I? Since I should be able to just run this again from right here. Really nice thing about Jupyter Notebooks is everything remains in memory and context, so it's really easy to go back and run pieces of code again. So now let's talk about cloning content, because this is really what we want to understand. So I'm really only going to focus on content from one user, right? I don't want to start moving all content from a portal, because that and sometimes may not make a lot of sense. Typically, in these use cases, you probably want to move a subset of data. So for this particular user, which is me, by the way, in the source portal, that's basically list out all the content that I own, including inside of folders. So here's a whole bunch of information that we're going to try to work through some of it to clone from one portal to the next, okay? The first thing I want to try to look at is a image service that I have, all right? So let's get that image service. All right, and you know what? In the source portal, let's go take a look at it. Let's see. So here's the imagery layer, and let's just throw that on a map, just so we can see it. So this is an image service in Haiti. This probably is a little bit old. It takes a few seconds to draw, but it's a whole bunch of panchromatic imagery in an image service of this area. So let's just give it 1 second. I just want to make sure that you don't think I'm blowing smoke here or something. It will draw here in a moment. Come on, come on. All right, so sure enough, it's a panchromatic service. It should draw if I let it there. I can zoom in and hopefully you can see that, this is, I'm not sure how high res it really gets, but it's a black and white image service, okay? Now remember one of the things I said earlier. I said some things clone well, some things don't clone well. Image services does not clone well, but it will copy the item. Don't get me wrong. It's just not going to recreate the image service on the target with all the imagery and all of that. So when it comes to image services and map services, it's only going to create the item by reference, okay? So let's talk about how you would start to clone items. So there are low-level ways to do this, but we have a higher-level method called clone items that was introduced a few releases ago. This makes your life very, very easy. Instead of like trying to figure out how to recreate the item with all the same information, use this method because there's a lot of that has been encapsulated into this method and it's super useful. So if I just type out this method and do a question mark, that gives me a pop-up so that I can easily see the signature of this method. So you can see the different parameters that it's expecting, what's required, what's optional, and things like that. All right, but the first thing is items, folder, and some things like that. So let's kind of walk through this, okay? So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to say, hey, in the target source portal, I want to clone items, and I want to clone this item, the image server variable, okay? So it expects a list of items, okay? That's what this method exists, is a list of item objects. And there's another parameter that says copy true, okay? So if we go back and look at this, it says copy data true. If we scroll down, we should be able to see it. Optional boolean indicating whether the data should be copied with any feature layer or feature collection. Default is true, data will be copied, all right? So I purposely put this here and set it to true to try to maybe fool you or trick you a little bit, but that's not really what I'm trying to do. Is even though I say true here, because it's an image service, it's not going to copy by value. It's only going to do this by reference, okay? So over in my environmental portal, let's go to my content. Let's just kind of set the stage for what things look like. Okay, so that's kind of what I got going on at the moment. Whole lot. Okay. So now I'm going to go ahead and clone my first item. All right, so let's run this cell. Oh, perfect, perfect, perfect. More errors. You guys are probably just loving this today. What is going on, JSON? Huh. Man, I'm not having much luck. With all the coronavirus stuff and everyone working from home and on VPN, I don't know. Interesting. Okay, we're gonna skip over this. If I got time, I might come back to it. Let's let's move on to the things that kind of do work well for us, and this is copying a hosted feature service. Okay, so in my source portal, I have a hosted feature service called Earthquakes Date and Time. And you know what? I'm gonna come back over here for a minute. I'm gonna try one more thing. I'm gonna come back to content. I'm not sure. Should be shared with everyone. Should be public. I have a hosted feature service, so we can look at this. It's just some, dots on a map. Not a big deal. So this is a hosted feature service. So I want to move this hosted feature service, from my source portal to the other. Okay. So I should be able to easily. So I'm going to get a handle to that hosted feature service in the source, and now I'm going to say, hey, go copy this to the target. Hopefully this works. This will hang up. It doesn't necessarily give you a whole lot of feedback as this is running. But once it completes, it should print that item out so that you know that it has run successfully. And it did. I'm still aggravated by what happened up here. Maybe we can come back to that. Is my item ID right? 79. D2. Did I do this right? Yeah, that's right. That's right. I'm sorry. All right, so what just happened? So what the Python API did is it went to that hosted feature service, collected up all of those points, packaged it, and then moved it over and published it into my target portal as a new hosted feature service, okay? So if we come over to environmental and I do a refresh here, you can see that I now have this hosted feature service over here, earthquakes, date, and time. If we go look at it, at the item details, we will see that the URL of this item is indeed pointing to my ArcGIS server in my target environment. So it has truly made a copy of this entire hosted feature service, moved it over and published it in this new environment. So that's really, really cool. And just to make sure that everything's working well, I should be able to open this in a web map on this environment. Of course, I got an old one here, so that's yeah. I should have done that. Opened in new web map. Let me go back and say let's open in a new map. Sorry about that. And sure enough, in my new environment, I'm displaying points. So that's really powerful, really cool. I've copied that hosted feature service over. Just simply being able to script it and things like that. All right, everyone with me still? All right, so that's cool. I don't know why my this thing here. Maybe I should have set this. I mean, not really sure. Quite aggravated when things don't work, especially when I've already run them once. It is not liking that at all. All right, I'll come back and fix that. Okay, so let's move on. So that's copying an individual hosted feature service. The next thing I have here is a web map. Let's go look at this web map. All right, so which web map am I talking about? I am talking about a web map called Mali Web Map. All right, so I'm going to come over here in my source portal. I'm going to go back to content. All right, in Mali. So I have some hosted feature services here. I have a Mali web map as well as a web application. But let's go look at the web map. Very simple, nothing, just a couple hosted feature services on a map with some cities and rows, right? Nothing major at all, okay? So this is, this is the web map that we want to copy from the source to the target, okay? Now I'm going to run clone items here, and I'm going to use a new parameter called folder. So that's going to create a new folder in my content, and everything's going to end up there. This will also help you organize content as you clone it over. So let's run this. So here's what this is doing. This is very, very cool. What this does is it takes the web map, it interrogates it to see what's in that web map, and if there are any hosted feature services in that web map, it will copy those over first. It will then copy over the web map, and it will actually swizzle the URLs and do everything for you. So in the new environment, the web map will be fully functional with the new hosted feature services and the URLs fixed in this new environment, okay? So this is very exciting when we talk about copying or cloning that allows you to do something like this. So if we go take a look at this in our new, I guess I can get rid of the cleanup portal. That's going to aggravate me. Our new target environment over here. So let's go back to my content. Remember I specified a folder, Mali, so this automatically created a folder for me called Mali. And in there it put not only the web map, but also the hosted feature services. All right, so if I open this web map, open it. I guess I could have saved a link there by clicking on. So here is the web map. It's in my target portal. More importantly, it's using layers from my target portal. So if we go to the item details on one of the hosted feature services, for example, the cities, you can see that the URL is pointing to my new environment and not referencing back to my old environment or to the source environment. So very cool. So this allows you, the exciting thing about this is this allows you to set up a web map with hosted feature services, configure the symbology. You might have noticed the symbology came over as well. Pop-ups, all of, visibilities, all that kind of anything associated with the web map. It moves it over as well as the hosted feature services and gets everything set up so it's fully functional in your new environment. Very powerful, very exciting. So that's a great one. Okay. So let's take a look at a couple more examples. How about if I clone a web map that has map services in it? Remember I said earlier that map services is one of those things that does not clone very well. Okay. So I have a web map in my target portal called Appalachian Trail. So we can go take a look at that. I have a web map. I have two map services published in this environment that are in that web map. All right, so easy enough. We can open it, take a look at it. Not a big deal, right? So what happens when I try to clone a web map that has map services in it? Well, let's find out. Wow, that came over really quick. You might think, did that work? Well, let's find out. Let's see what happened. So in my target portal, let's go back to my content. I specified a folder to create, which it did. And you can see that only the web map is here. All right. Now, what has happened is because the web map had map services in it, didn't have any hosted feature services, it basically just copied it over as is. And if we look at the layers here, it actually has links to the old, you can say, oh, it can't find that. This is a little bit of a bug, but basically what happened is it has links. It's using, so let's open this in my target environment. It's still pointing to the layers in the target environment or in the source environment. It's pointing to the map services back on the old environment. So if we go here and like go to, you can notice, go to the description, it opens up the map service endpoint to the old environment. So in this particular case, web maps will come over, but any map services or image services on it won't be replicated using this process. It will simply just come over as is, and those URLs will point back to the old environment. Okay, so it's just something to be aware of. That depending on your scenario, this may work for you well, or it may not work for you well. So let's take this one step further before we kind of wrap things up here. Let's go look at a web app, right? So we've talked about individual layers. We talked about web maps. How about a web application? So I have a web application. Redlands. So I have a web application. Seems I have two here. But the web application that points to a web map that has several hosted feature services in it. So wonder what happens in this case. So let's run this. Well, I can tell you what's going to happen. So one other thing I'm going to do here is I also go through and do some sharing. So as these layers come over, I actually not only do I run clone items, but then I apply some of the sharing to items as well. So this is just an example so you can know how this, as items are cloned and created, you can apply sharing to that as well. So what this is doing is I basically said, hey, let's clone the web app. So what this does is it interrogates the web app. It finds the web map, and then it follows, keeps going down the line. Then it says, oh, this web map has a whole bunch of hosted feature services on it. I'm going to clone those over. I'm then going to clone over the web map, fix the URLs in it so it points to the new environment. And then it will clone over the web app and then fix it so that the right web map is displayed in it. So this is, very cool where you don't have to go through necessarily and clone a whole bunch of individual items. you can just clone one item and it knows how to sort of walk the tree of dependencies, of data dependencies, in order to copy those over. So it printed it out. We're going to assume it worked here. So let's go back to my content again. It created a new folder for me, which I asked it to. There's the web application. There's the web app. There's the hosted feature services that came over with it. So in theory, I should be able to open this web application. Let's view it. Oh, that's interesting. Okay, well, that's I know why that is. This is a 10.8.1 portal, so I apologize a little bit that may be some of the reasons that I'm having some troubles here. Is I'm trying to copy from a 10.8 to a 10.8.1 portal, and this is a daily build of the 10.8 portal, but that's okay. But let's see, if I go back, the web map should work okay. And yeah, so there's building some of our trees and roads. Okay, so our web map came over, everything looks great, life is good. So, a lot of times someone also asks is like, well, suppose one of the hosted feature services already exists. Will it try to recopy it? So let's go to our target portal. Let's go back over here just for a moment. And let's delete everything except one of the hosted feature services. Let's delete, the app, the web app, everything but the streets. Okay, so let's say we've already copied over streets for some reason. So let's delete these guys here. So streets is already there, right? Copied over from before. So if we rerun this clone once again, let's see what happens. It takes just a couple minutes, and we're about wrapped up here. It's been close to an hour now, so you're probably tired of hearing me jibber jabber too much. Did some troubleshooting along the way. Not sure how successful it was. Tried to make the experience as as dynamic as if it was if we were doing this in person. Sorry we couldn't do things in person this year. So copy things over. If we go back to the target portal and kind of do a refresh on that folder, so you can see it didn't, it copied, trees, it kept it, or what did I leave behind? Streets? I forget now. Yeah, streets. And so it didn't try to recopy that or anything. So it is a little bit smart enough to know, hey, this hosted feature service already exists by this name and in this folder, so I'm not going to recopy it, but I will use it to update my web map with that layer, that layer URL and all that. So there are, some intelligence has been built into the clone process as well. So what else could you clone? I mean, there are many things that you could technically copy or clone, anywhere from portal skinning, such as your homepage, the description, banners. Many of the configuration and admin functionalities are in the Python API. So anything in the Python API, in theory, you could clone or copy from one environment to the other, including things like SSL certificates, security settings, and things like that. What are some future improvements we're looking at? Just zoom in here a little bit. Continue improvements to clone items, so we support more types, more complexity types of things. There's a lot of need for supporting this in a disconnected environment so that you can export, let's just call them packages or bundles of information, and do the same thing in disconnected environments or environments that don't have access to each other. One of the questions was, hey, if you have a secure service, one where you have to put a username and password, do you have to, does that come over with the stored username and password? And the answer to that is no. We don't have access to the password once it's been created. So any secure services or proxy items where you had to type in a username and password when you created the item or stored the item, you would have to, in this case, recreate it with that same username and password. And always we, ask for your input. We have a public GitHub. I would also say feel free to email me with any questions. I'm always more than willing to help out, to answer questions, especially if it means is there new areas of functionality that we can incorporate. So that's all for it from me. Sorry we couldn't be together in person this year at Dev Summit in Palm Springs. Hope everyone is safe. Take care of yourself, take care of your families, and we hope to see you at a conference soon. Thank you very much.